we'll get started then. So good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for joining our Lowdown on Lean Labeling webinar. So this webinar is going to bring together industry experts with decades of combined experience. And that includes Kevin Lidversis of Newcastle Systems, Marty Johnson and Christine Weber of Zebra, and Nick Recht of TEKLYNX. So we're anticipating this webinar to be completed in about 30 minutes. And from there, we'll leave time for Q&A. So I believe you have a Q&A button. So feel free to start asking, your questions when they, come to mind, and we will do our best to get all of them answered for you. All right, so here we go, the lowdown of lean labeling trends. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll start with a quick poll question to the group. So let me launch the polling here for you. And the question is, do you currently review or map your labeling process? So if you could go in and, start voting there. And once I'll give it a few seconds here, I'll end the polling and share that with you. No. All right. All right, well, for this one, let's go with this. So I'll end polling and share results. Okay, so this probably does not surprise, it doesn't surprise me if anybody else wants to chime in from the group, but when you're reviewing your labeling process, only when a problem occurs. That sounds right to me. I'm sure that's what I would do. All right. All right, so we'll just continue on. Thanks for filling that out there. All right, so Kevin, I think you are up.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for reviewing those poll results. I guess it doesn't surprise me that almost 3/4 of you don't really look at your labeling process until there's a problem. And that's one of the issues. There are a couple schools of thoughts that you can kind of adapt. It's like, one, there's a problem, and we got to dig deeper and find out why. But after that, it's usually late, right? There's a problem, there's a recall, there's a customer return, and then you've got to go try to fix things quickly. And so it's difficult, and you can lose customers over that. And especially if you're in food or medical, there's people's lives are at stake. So it's really important to take a deeper look at your labeling process. And I call the label on the left sort of the Rodney Dangerfield of the labeling world, and maybe it doesn't get the respect it deserves, right? And I can tell you, it's if you look at it as maybe as a way to add value to your customers, which it has done for decades. The label's been around for decades, quietly doing its job, getting product from point A to point B pretty much seamlessly, right? And it's just growing and growing. Next year, e-commerce is expected to be in the $1 trillion range. So just think about how many packages are going to be shipped and how critical the label is. And then you want to get even more personal, think about COVID vaccines. I'm going for my second shot of Pfizer next week, and I'm pretty certain that they treat their labeling process with respect, right? And not only for their internal customers, their users, but the people who actually get that vaccine, to make sure that they're getting the right lot numbers and doses. And so it's we hope you take a look at it maybe more to the right side of that slide as we go forward. Next slide, Christine. So if you're looking at your current state, and again, you've mentioned that you don't really look at things until there's a problem. So if maybe your ideal state is as simple as a box coming down a line in an e-commerce center, and it just gets scanned, a label gets printed and applied all in one swoop, and it's seamless, right? But you may have more of a manual process, which is what most people have because they don't have the budget of a huge company. So they may be walking up to a station and searching for formats and then typing data multiple times, waiting for somebody to maybe verify the data or waiting for IT to repair something. And then maybe they need somebody to verify that the data is even correct because they're afraid it's not. And then they might have to make an adjustment to the format or the printer itself, or maybe the printer's down. It's just in disrepair and it hasn't been maintained properly. And then they batch print maybe because they're so far away from where the work takes place. They're carrying batches of labels, mixing orders, and then they're finally applying them. So you can see there are more steps there and obviously a lot more chance for error. So if you can kind of think about where you want to get to, regardless of your business, try to make it as clean as possible. And the next slide. And what I think a clean labeling or a lean labeling process would look like would be somebody can pretty much be guaranteed they're going to get the right format with the right information in the right quantity. They're not overprinting or underprinting, and the right quality, meaning the label stocks is perfect, the barcodes are scanning, the data is accurate, and all of this is done without waste or with as little waste as possible. So on the next slide, first of all, when you hear the word waste and lean, they go side by side. And if you've had formalized lean training, you understand what these 8 wastes are and how they affect really any process. And labeling is no different. If you have defects, and that would be maybe picking the wrong format, or it has the wrong data on it, or somebody's applying the wrong label to a box, or the label's not scanning, those are all defects that can really, really hurt your business. If you're overproducing labels, that's a problem. If you're waiting on data from IT or for printers to be repaired, that's waste. If people aren't doing what they're supposed to, then you're not using their talent properly. If you're transporting goods to a workstation because it's too far away, you're moving product multiple times, and you want to minimize your touches in any process. If you have too much inventory, for instance, if you have hundreds and hundreds of label formats, but you only really need 10% of those, it's confusing to the operators, right? And it can create a problem. And if you're walking back and forth to a station, that's what our business does. We're in the business of reducing motion. So we take a Zebra printer, scanner, media, and TEKLYNX software, and we move it from point A to point B. And sometimes that can be literally 30, 40, 50% of the process. And then last but not least, the extra processing. If you're constantly touching, moving things, typing, walking, it just is going to really hurt your efficiency, and it can also lead to defects. So if you're kind of traveling like the boat above, everything's good, we're not even going to look at our process, as 71% of people said, until there's a problem. It's too late. So start to look at the rocks as problems in your process and maybe try to identify them. Maybe it's just your printers aren't being kept up, or your media is not high quality, or you are mislabeling products a lot. Start to really dig deeper so you can get ahead of it, and before that big problem occurs. If we go on to the next slide, I think if you want to improve your plan, and I think most of you do, that's maybe why you're on here today. So like, how do we get a little better? Go see where the process takes place. It's really important to do this, not from your office, but if you're in a warehouse or a factory setting, go right down to the floor, go right to the station where these labels get printed, and observe what's going on, and then ask why things are happening, right? You need to understand why people are searching for multiple formats, or walking, or waiting for IT for information, and then map the process, and ultimately map the process with the people who do the work every day, because they know best how the job needs to get done. Identify waste from that prior screen, and try to remove as much as you can, or reduce it at a minimum. But overall, just keep trying to improve that process to that goal of scan, print, apply without defects and waste. And on the next slide, as you go through this process, it's really important to map things and measure them. And we have an app called Motion Meter. It's free. It's available for Android or iPhone. And if you look at this simple 7-step process, the only real part of that equation is when you're printing a label that the customer is okay with paying for. But if somebody is waiting on a printer and searching for formats, excessively typing and data entry, and the printer goes down, now, and then we're waiting for information or verification, and then we're actually walking, you can see that most of that process is waste, and your customers aren't willing to pay for that. So if you had to take 20, 21 minutes every time you printed labels, that's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your efficiency, and eventually you're going to have a problem. And we want you to get ahead of that. So I think there's a poll question coming up, Christine.
We do. We're going to have poll question number 2. So let me just grab that. So let's launch that one. So where do you experience the most waste in your labeling process today? So we have, it looks like 4. So if you're walking to print station, manual labels, data entry, slow print heads, and the good old all of the above. All right. All right, well, let's see what we get here. So I'm just going to end it and share the results. All right, so it looks like there's two that are close. The manual label data entry, that looks like it was the top one, and then really close to it is, walking from print station to print station. And so if there's anybody here that wants to speak to that, Kevin?
I don't think it's not, I thought all of the above might be there, but it's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
that's why we're all here today, to educate people as to how we can maybe help with these problems.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so the next one coming up, I believe, is going to be Marty Johnson.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. I want to take just a little step back, and because I know most of you in the audience today have supply chain responsibilities for your organization, or you're involved in some aspect of your supply chain operations. Because of that, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some of the disruptive trends that Zebra has seen in the market today. And this definitely impacts your labeling processes and your labeling operations for your organization. So many supply chains are being pushed to increase their velocity due to shorter lead times and faster delivery requirements. That same day delivery is really becoming the norm. As you place an order online, you're expecting a fairly fast delivery, and that's becoming faster and faster, and that directly impacts your supply chain operations. Secondly, customers are purchasing fewer items at a time, but more often. And so our customers are moving from picking pallets, which has kind of been the traditional supply chain operation, now to picking pieces. And each of those pieces you're picking may be a specific shipment that you have to make, and that requires labeling. And if you slow down your labeling process, you're going to slow down your volume. Customers are demanding more product choices. So as consumers and organizations want different sizes, different styles, different colors, that's going to impact your operations. Customers also want to have visibility to available inventory and also have transparency when that item that they've ordered is in shipment to them. And then lastly, free shipping and free returns are being encouraged by many organizations, and that's going to, again, impact your operations as those returns increase. Next slide, please. So all this disruption to your supply chain is really going to require your workers and your processes to be more productive and efficient. Technology is one of the key drivers to help with this, and there are many products on the market that you can leverage, from mobile computers, tablets, scanners, RFID technology, barcode printers, and many others. Because we're talking about labeling, I think it's most appropriate to really focus on printers. And I just wanted to go through the rest of my discussion explaining some of the considerations that I think you should take a look at when you're selecting either a replacement barcode printer or maybe a new barcode printer for your operation. The first item here is seek out printers which really are going to provide productivity improvements for your organization, your employees. So will a stationary printer located in a centralized spot require extra steps for your workers to retrieve needed labels? Or if you place a printer on a cart, like you see on the right-hand side in Newcastle cart system, would that increase your productivity and efficiency? Or maybe a mobile printer that's carried by your workers, that might have a positive impact on your daily operations as well. The other thing to consider from a productivity improvement perspective related to printers is how easy is it for your printer operators to change the labels and ribbons on the printers? Also think about the other consumables that are associated with printers, things like print heads and platen rollers. How long does the printer need to be down to replace those items? If you have to have your printer down for a half hour, an hour to replace those items, that's obviously going to impact your productivity and efficiency. So, Zebra, we've focused a lot making improvements around our hardware to address those items. So on some of our newer generation of printers, we reduced the time in half to load the labels and ribbons, and also to replace those print heads and platen rollers. So our focus has been to require less downtime for normal maintenance and normal replenishment of media when it comes to the printers. The second item here is, think beyond the printer hardware. Hardware is what you physically see and touch, and you can tell if it's well built or not. But think beyond the hardware. In today's environment, there are other factors that you have to consider as it relates to your overall organization. Many printer deployments are tightly coupled to your data and network infrastructure and IT organization. At a high level, you need to think about how easily that printer can integrate into your technical environment. And one of the factors related to this is ensuring the printer can comply with your IT data and network security strategies. You need to make sure the printer you select provides a robust level of device security to protect your data and network infrastructure. The printer that you selected and deployed 10 years ago will not stand up to today's security threats. Also related to this is device management. If your organization is currently running or expects to run a large group of printers, you need to make sure those printers can be managed remotely. This capability greatly increases your IT organization's productivity and efficiency and can ensure maximum uptime for your printers. From an application perspective, think about what your application needs are. How many labels per day do you need to print? What size is that label you need to print? What's the resolution of that label? Does the barcode need a specific resolution, or does the human readable information need a certain resolution to ensure that it can be read and scanned properly? Is a basic barcode label all you need, or are you considering RFID in the future? If you're considering RFID, then you need to select a printer that is RFID ready, or it can be upgraded in the field at a later date to provide that RFID capability. From an operating environment perspective, where are your printers going to be physically placed? Are they going to be indoors? Are they going to be outdoors? Are they going to be in a clean or a dusty environment? And does the operating environment experience temperature extremes? That's going to impact your printer choice. The last point I wanted to make is that you need to select a printer vendor and a partner that's going to be with you for the long run. And you want to ensure that they have the resources to help you along the way. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Marty. At the beginning, Kevin talked a little bit about a quality label. And one of the things that I always look at is, you can look at a label invisibly and it looks like it's going to work well, it's going to scan, and you don't have any scanning issues, but there are other parts of the label that could impact your operations. And if you aren't using the optimal labels for your application, it can end up being the most costly part of a printing solution and can have a huge impact on your operations. So some of the operational impacts include increased printer downtime due to premature printhead failure. Some labels and ribbons in the market have rough surfaces. And since the labels and ribbons come into direct contact with the printhead, that rough surface actually wears down that printhead faster, which requires more downtime because you have to replace that printhead more often in order to get a scannable label. Also, when printing thermal transfer labels, if your label and ribbon aren't a good fit, it can result in poor print quality, or the ribbon could easily rub off, resulting in unidentification of an asset. Or you could be required to print at a speed slower than the rest of your operation, causing a printing bottleneck and impacting your key KPIs. When poor print quality results in unscannable packages, you end up with scanning bottlenecks that prevent the efficient routing of assets. And it also requires manual intervention because someone's going to have to take that package off the line and relabel it to get it to where it needs to go. Unoptimized labeling solutions also result in reduced efficiency of your frontline workers, whether they have to relabel those unscannable packages or have to modify processes around label printing if the printing isn't where it needs to be. Or we see a lot of customers modifying the labels to ensure they stick, scan, or to reduce instances of errors. And I'm going to give you some examples coming up of these in a minute. Next slide, please. But one thing we also want to reiterate, a label can do more than you think it can do. So it can improve workflows. Labels aren't just, a square piece of paper with an adhesive on them. They can do a lot more. Through the use of, label sets, as shown here, where it's a label, but there's multiple labels within the label. And how does that fit your processes? Do you print in one station, use one of the labels there, then attach it and to the item and it moves down and the other labels are used, for an example? Or perforations are things that can also enhance by, making that label varying in length if you have variations in what you're printing, as well as there are also labels that are continuous, that when used in a printer with a cutter, it can cut the label to the exact length that it's needed. There's also tons of security features that can be added if you need to know that a label was removed as well. So there's lots of options to think about there. Next slide, please. So labels can also resist moisture, chemicals, and abrasion. There are thousands of thermal label and ribbon combinations in the market, each with different performance characteristics, such as the face stack, which is the top of the label. Synthetic labels provide more durability against environmental conditions, as well as chemicals and abrasion versus a paper label. There are many different types of adhesives that enable you to easily remove the label or make sure that label sticks well on a rough or dirty surface. And there's also different ribbon formulations, and not every ribbon talks well with every face stock. And so it's very important that you use the right ribbon formulation to make sure you get that good adherence to the face stock, as well at the same time that you also ensure that it delivers the durability needed in your application. In addition, a label can print on color. Zebra has a direct thermal solution called IQ Color that enables you to activate invisible inks that we place on the label when it's being printed. And a lot of this can alert people to look for key things and to help with routing or prevent errors. And a lot of this is being done manually today. Next slide. So one of the key things is how to identify some opportunities and ensure. One of them is ensure your printing solution is matching the pace of your production line and workers. Is your printer capable of printing faster, but you can't as the print quality suffers? Zebra worked with one customer who was, printing fast in one of their locations, and the other location was printing much slower, as kind of shown in this example here. And what we learned by working with the customer is that the one location was using a label and ribbon that didn't match up well together. And so they had to print slower to get the print to stick properly. And so by helping them identify the right ribbon that goes with the label they were purchasing and the right set, they were able to increase their label output to 68% in that facility that was suffering and get that print speed higher. So if you're not at that max print speed, and you're printing a paper label, especially with a barcode ribbon, there are opportunities by making sure you have the optimal supplies to get that print production moved forward. Okay. The other question that you can answer is, are labels being modified to get them to work? I mean, these are actual pictures of things that we've seen at customers where, frontline workers have been modifying those labels. So on the top left, they ended up introducing a product that was brown, and they were using clear labels. And when you put a clear label on a brown product, you can't scan the label because there's not enough contrast between the background and the barcode. And so how they solved this problem is they put a white label down, then put the clear label over the white label. So that's double the work, double the amount of supplies. On the bottom left, where you're talking about, we had a customer who was having challenges with read range of RFID when they were identifying a metal asset. And so they bought some bags and they put the label on the bags and then attached the bags to the metal asset. And there are other different types of label designs that can be used versus having to buy a second item and add a step in the process. We see a lot of people creating visual cues. Using highlighters as shown as in this example. We also see people buying, colored dots and cutting those dots and putting, writing something on them at the same time. And that process is very costly as well. It takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And there are more automated ways available now to make that happen, as well as the use of glue or tape to adhere the labels properly. Labels have come in with different adhesives, but if you're not getting the right adhesive for the surface that you're labeling, or the curvature of the surface is also really important, you could end up having to find ways to get those labels to stick and spend a lot of time doing that. Conversely, if you want to make sure the label is removable, some people are using tape so that it removes cleanly from the surface, and there are different adhesives to do that. So just wanted to call some of those things. And some of those things as you're doing your walkthrough and getting on the floor, these are things and not really problems, but they are kind of problems that you don't even know exist in the organization because your teams have been so diligent in making things work. Next slide. Okay, and the next couple questions here, are you having to relabel packages due to scanning issues? And, considering how many hours per day does someone spend relabeling because of poor quality media that's not printing correctly? And, if you could reduce that time dramatically, how that would impact your business and the KPIs and what that person could be doing instead. The other question is, understanding how often your printers are going down due to printhead failure. And how long it takes to get operations up and running after this happens. As Marty mentioned, is it 30 minutes? Isn't it an hour? Well, if you have, the optimal media, you should be getting the most out of your print heads. And we've run into situations with customers where they've switched media supplies and their labels, and that caused them to greatly increase their amount of downtime, which was a challenge for their operations and was not something they could adjust to well. So really the key points that I really wanted to get across is, quality is important from the barcode and scannability perspective, but also you have to look at the label fully and, think about, is this the optimal label based on my workflow? Is this the optimal label based on, it performing well from an adhesive perspective, from keeping the printers running as long as they can run? And this is just a sampling of some of the things we've seen. We've seen a lot of other issues and challenges that customers have run across. So now I will turn it over to Nick.
Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you, the other Christine and Kevin and Marty before that as well for setting me up here. So I think we've shared a lot of really good information so far, all on physical things that can touch or eliminate the waste associated with something that can be measured either in footsteps or in physical work relabeling due to media, ribbon, or adhesive problems, or efficiency due to things around printhead maintenance and whatnot. I am here to talk about the waste associated with the actual procedure of printing. And we break this down into 3 categories: design waste, printing process waste, and then one typically held by IT or the management group called management waste, or just label system management waste. So the first thing I'll discuss is design waste. So when we talk about design waste, we're really talking about the templates that you're printing, and are they designed in a fashion to support a reduction in the amount of templates that you manage so that you can more rapidly respond to the change demanded by your customers? More often than not, we see that labeling is necessary, but it's really a demand we're fulfilling, whether it is to put a very specific GS1 barcode on a pallet that we're sending to Walmart, or more data in a QR code so that our consumers can learn about lot numbers or better handle a recall if that happens. And when we can implement that change on broader scales by having smart templates, we see an increase in productivity and a reduction in the amount of errors. And the main ways that your template supports this is really by the use of templates rather than a label per product. as well as the use of database connections. When you leverage a database connection on a label, you really eliminate the need to manage several different labels, and you manage to a data set. And often that data set is one that already exists and is being duplicated by manual entry at print time, which we know from the polling question is a pain point for a couple of people. So I just wanted to talk about kind of design waste. Now I want to shift gears and talk about print waste or printing process waste. So you'd be surprised at how often prior to the pandemic, where I've spent a majority of my time at home or in the office rather than on site with my customers, where I would see businesses that had fully automated lines. Everything was automated, from the assembly of the product to the packaging of the product to the label being applied to the product. But the process of actually requesting the proper label and populating the proper data on that label was completely manual. In the automated world we live in, there's still portions of systems that haven't heavily been adopted automation. So, step one of automation is often driving data to a template from a business system. But in our most efficient deployments, we eliminate a process where somebody says file, open, pick from a list of available labels, return that to the interface, potentially pick which line they want to print to, and then pick a record from a database or populate data manually, with a process where as soon as the order is released from the business system, whether it's something like SAP or Oracle Business Suite, or even a custom homegrown application, when the order is released for what the person is to package or manufacture that day, we can very seamlessly and very straightforwardly take that data and have it send the proper label with the proper data to that printer, eliminating a process where a user makes decisions and types stuff in, where labeling simply becomes a result of an action within a business system. So that's kind of the gold standard of automation, reducing a manual process with a fully automated one. And along the way, we have quite a few methods we implement to help people print more efficiently. And one of them is simply by separating the design interface from the print interface using a form editing tool or a form viewing tool to make a process where a user maybe picks from a pick list rather than manually type something in. And then the last thing I like to talk about in eliminating print waste is the leveraging of native printer drivers. You can print to the Zebra devices using languages that or drivers that are meant to work with any system. When you use a TEKLYNX product, we have drivers made by TEKLYNX specifically for the use of the Zebra printers, which guarantees you're going to exploit the inches per second or the most efficient usage of that device without having to worry about complex configuration, as it's often a checkbox or a little warning symbol saying, hey, your counter is being sent as an image and you could make it a resident font. So that's printing waste elimination that I'd like to talk about. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the category of management waste or lean label management. And that really comes down to topics that are a bit broader than designing a label with a database connection or automating out of your ERP system, and really looking at labeling as something that doesn't just happen, but labeling as something that somebody does, and it can be used to drive efficiencies to the business, not only by eliminating the problems and some of the things we talked about, but making it easy for IT to deploy and implementing scalable solutions that work with your business. So the first thing here is the topic of centralization. Yes, no matter what you do, if you have the top of the line Newcastle systems cart and the best Zebra printer available, if you are deploying your labeling solution locally on the station on that cart, rather than deploying it centrally and potentially accessing just the printing interface from a browser-based interface, that can make it hard to manage to your labeling system. If you've kind of opened up Pandora's box and let the people who should just print have the authority to design, or the people who should just have the ability to design be the go-to person for reprints, you can really help by managing things a little better by separating those user controls. My favorite is when I start helping somebody do a lean labeling assessment in their business, and we find that each business unit uses a separate solution with a completely separate process associated with it. When it comes to, implementing a lean labeling system, many disparate systems is always one of the things that you can make better very quickly. And then the last thing that I like to mention when it comes to management is that when you're evaluating solutions, I encourage you to make sure to evaluate solutions that are cloud ready. The cloud looks a lot different based on what your company is and what your company does and what is already in the cloud. Is your ERP system in the cloud? So it makes sense to have the labeling system in the cloud, or is your ERP system local, but you have stores of data you need to access in the cloud? I'd say, so make sure that your solution providers can kind of walk the walk and talk the talk on the cloud side of things. So with that, I just want to wrap it up by saying, with Newcastle Systems, you can get rid of your labeling room and put labeling on the production line and kind of have it go with the user where they need to print the labels. With Zebra, you can make sure you're getting the best media, adhesive, ribbons, and printhead maintenance, as well as the best device in the business for the most reasonable cost. And with TEKLYNX, you can be guaranteed that we're going to take every step we can to help you have the most lean and efficient labeling process to exploit the benefits of the physical hardware you have. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to Christine now to wrap us up.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot, Nick. So I think we're going to wrap up here with Kevin.
Yeah, well, thanks to everybody for presenting, and hopefully, this maybe highlighted some things you hadn't thought about before, and to kind of lead you back to looking at your process and as a way to not only make your business better, but to add value to your customers. And for us, I think just focus on these three categories, maybe for now, your fingerprints and your footprints. If you're really studying your defects before they occur, you'll be ahead of the curve and really understand why they're occurring. Really look at all the processing, right? You can see you can print a label in 3 steps or 100 steps, but really try to hone in as to how many steps are occurring and get rid of some of that waste. And then last but not least, walking. We take TEKLYNX and software and Zebra devices and media and move it from A to B. But if the process isn't optimized with all of those devices and software, all we've really done is taken a bad process and made it faster. And that's not the intent here. It's really looking at the process from start to finish and making it as good as possible. And that's the slide for me, Christine.
All right. Well, thanks, team. So that leaves us a little more time here for some Q&A. So what other lowdown can we provide for you? So let's see here. If you have any questions, please go to your Q&A and we can go ahead and start answering those for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read one here that we've got. What was the application name that helps see where you are wasting time labeling?
I think that's referring to the motion meter.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep.
Maybe you can send a link to the attendees.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the motion meter, yes, I can absolutely do that after. That is through Newcastle Systems. And like I said, it's a really simple free app you can get directly from, the App Store, or obviously Google Play. And again, just, very simple to use. And, it really helps, put in perspective, what is that waste? It makes you kind of look at the waste and look at your processes And it'll just very quickly show you what is that waste really, costing you over the course of a year. Great. So let's see here. Maybe we have some here in chat. All right. So again, what is the name of the app? Motion Meter. So Newcastle Motion Meter. You can look up there. Again, I'll send that out to the people, to the group. Another one here is, how can you tell that the label has materials causing excessive wear on print heads? Is there some sort of rating?
Yeah, it actually is not that simple to figure that out. I think, in direct thermal mode, you should be getting what a million linear feet about, or in thermal transfer mode, 3 million linear feet.
It's inches,
Right?
Christine, sorry.
And thank
Yep.
you, Marty, inches printed. And so if you're, struggling to meet those numbers, then I think that is something where you need to look at your media on. And I believe, Marty, one of the apps that we have for our printers can tell you how much you've printed in those inches, right?
Right. We have, when I was going through my portion of the presentation, I talked about device management. We have an application called Printer Profile Manager, which enables you to monitor the amount of print coming from the printer and the print head. So that's one way to kind of gauge when you need to replace your print heads based upon the usage that Christine just mentioned that the print heads are typically expected to provide.
Right. And so other than that, it's usually like we've switched labels and something's not right because now I can't print as long. Or you feel like your printing isn't kind of keeping up, or you feel like the downtime is excessive. It's always good to, and we're happy to take a look at the media. We can do some testing actually at Zebra by working with Newcastle to, identify if the media is an issue.
Great. I have a couple more questions here. Any idea how much motion costs an organization overall? Anybody want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see is that when people measure it, it can be anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, literally, per day. It depends on the process, right? And how much back and forth and how many labels per hour they're doing. And really, it depends. And it's not dependent on business size either, or it could be an enterprise company, it could be a small business. It could be 1,000 square foot area. It could be 1,000,000 square foot. So it's just dependent on the process, but safe to say, we usually see people wasting 1 to 4 hours a day.
Okay. And this one here is just, yes, we will be sending a video copy of this meeting. So the recording will be sent out. So certainly you can share that with others who were unable to make that. And one of the last questions I see here is, what percentage of a process, in an overall process, is wasted motion?
Well, again, it's just sort of mathematically, when you use the motion meter, it can be up to 50%. Just depends on the process itself.
Okay. Let's see here. Well, I think we got a couple more, if it's okay. I just want to, be sure of the time here. I have a device that they have indicated that could save 4 seconds per scan transaction. Is that really significant? Anyone?
Is that a Marty? I guess, Marty, is that one of yours?
I'm not sure I understand the question. They have a device that could save 4 seconds per scan transaction. Not sure I can't really understand the question if they're talking about a scanner.
A barcode
scanner.
Barcode scanner. Sorry.
I guess it kind of depends on how many packages, right? And how many things you're scanning a day. And if the rest of your process can keep up with that, right? Because, it's great to scan faster, but if the next stage in the process, can't keep up with that speed, I think, are you saving anything? And then I think the number of packages, right, Marty, would kind of play into that.
Yeah. I mean, we've got, different types of scanners from Zebra. Some of them are, wearable scanners. So ring scanners that you wear on your hand and you have a mobile computer strapped to your wrist. so it's not necessarily saving scan time, it's saving motion time, going back to kind of Kevin's comment earlier about motion. So if you have a scanner you're holding in your hand, you're going to have to physically move that scanner up and down versus having a scanner on your ring finger that you're scanning as you're reaching. So there are different types of scanning technology, and it's best to match the scanner that you're using with your application to make sure it's the right scanner for what your operations is.
Okay, looks like we have one more and we'll wrap it up. Is what's an average cost for a mobile station? Kevin, you want to grab that?
I mean, I can only talk to our component. I mean, Marty, Christine, and Nick will have to chime in, but if you just take the cart, you can run anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. And of course you've got a printer, and I guess Marty can speak to that, and Christine can speak to the media, and Nick to the software side of that.
Yeah, on the printer side, you really have to kind of look at some of those things I had mentioned earlier. What's the right printer for your application? If you are printing small volumes of labels, 1,500 or less numbers of labels per day, your printer can be a lower end printer, maybe $400 or $500. If you're printing 24/7, if you're just running thousands and thousands of labels through your printer, then you're going to get a much more expensive printer, maybe $2,500, $3,000. So you kind of have to look at understand the use case and the duty cycle of printing to really pick the right printer.
And when it comes to the software that's driving the printing, we have software that at entry level is less than $250 a year for a subscription-based license. And then in some of our larger enterprise level deployments, the cost per seed of station that's using it is still in that $200 to $500 per year range. But the capital expenditure for the enterprise level label management system, is variable based on the amount of printers and the amount of print users you're using.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. If I think we're 2 minutes over, but I think you guys did a great job. I'm Christine Wheeler with Newcastle Systems. Was very happy to facilitate this, and great job, everyone. So I'll be sure to be sending out the recording that can be shared out. Also provide, if you didn't see that, the link to the Motion Meter app, and certainly reach out to us. I'll make sure that I have contact information for each of the speakers, and you can reach out to them, individually if you have specific questions. So have a great rest of the day, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Christine. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.